God orders revenge. He will direct our hands. He will aid us.
On the night of August 22nd, 1791, 1,000 enslaved Africans attacked their masters.
Les esclaves empoisonnaient, les esclaves piquaient, les esclaves tuaient, les esclaves voulaient leur indépendance.
For them to be free, they have to have the same amount of violence that you exerted on them. That's why the revolution was very brutal. This is that hatred in the first day that came out.
The rebel numbers grew from 1,000 to 20,000 as newly liberated slaves burned cane fields and refineries in order to destroy the system that had enslaved them. Within 3 days, the most profitable plantations in the Americas had been laid waste, 184 sugar plantations and 1,000 coffee farms. Whites and mixed-race people fled to the capital city for mutual protection. From there, they watched firestorms on all horizons.
You've got a fiery cataclysm of enormous scale. I mean, the people on ships in the harbor supposedly could read their mail by the light of these fires that were, 10, 15, 20 miles away, to give you some faint idea of what this would have been like if you were there.
The eruption of violence put Toussaint Louverture in a difficult position. His own fortunes were tied to the plantation system, and he had straddled the white and black worlds for some 15 years.
Toussaint was no longer a slave. He didn't have the mentality of a slave. He was the owner of 2 or 3 plantations. He was not of the same class anymore. His interests were different from the interests of the masses.
But Toussaint's first reaction to the raging violence was based neither on money nor race. It was personal. He went back to the plantation where he had been born to protect his former owners.
It's true that Toussaint Louverture did return to the plantation in the early days of the insurrection and kind of maintained order there. And there's the question of why. Why would he do that? I think Toussaint was somebody who understood the value of humanity in many ways, right? And I think he probably had gained that precisely from being on the receiving end of slavery.
Back in the capital city, as Toussaint helped his former master flee the violence, Saint-Domingue's whites repelled assault after assault. They soon regrouped and launched their own offensive. The bloodletting continued day after day, week after soul-numbing week. French colonist Pamphile de Lacroix.
The country is filled with dead bodies which lie unburied. The Negroes have left the whites with stakes driven through them into the ground. And the white troops, who take no prisoners, leave Negroes dead upon the field.
3 months after the revolution started, the voodoo priest Boukman Doti was killed in battle. White soldiers decapitated him and burned his body in view of the rebel camp. In the words of one observer, the conflict in Saint-Domingue had become an exterminating war. In the autumn of 1791, Toussaint Louverture could no longer sit on the sidelines. Despite a wife and children, despite the chance even of losing his own freedom, Toussaint didn't hesitate long.
He left everything. He dropped everything, and he went to the mountain.
It was an act of extraordinary risk. The island's 500,000 slaves outnumbered whites by 12 to 1, but their ultimate prospects were poor. Few had experience in military strategy, and they had no unifying history or long-term vision.
The fact is, a lot of people didn't really know what freedom was supposed to look like. Nobody had really even theorized or imagined this before.
Toussaint, on the other hand, had a unique window on the world. He was schooled in African and European culture alike, and had read some of France's most radical thinkers.
Toussaint had certainly read a text by l'Abbé Raynal, which predicted that out of the colonial slave system with its, frightening imbalance of numbers and horrible suffering and all of that, there would emerge a leader, revolutionary leader. I believe Raynal referred to him as a black Spartacus. Toussaint is a literate person. There's no way he would have missed this.
As rebel leaders struggled to forge a disciplined fighting force, Toussaint's talents and intellect set him apart. Then, in December 1791, some 4 months after the rebellion began, black enthusiasm began to crumble. The new French government in Paris sent more than 10,000 military reinforcements to help the colonists reestablish white rule. Supplies were scarce in the mountains, and winter brought famine to the rebel lines. Thousands began to surrender.
Toussaint Louverture was not somebody who liked violence, really. He was good at it if he had to do it, but he preferred to use negotiation, diplomacy, guile, trickery, anything but, and if that didn't work, he'd kill you, no problem. But he'd try anything else first.
Toussaint Louverture was asked to write up a settlement offer in exchange for the freedom of 200 slave leaders and better working conditions on the plantations. The proposal offered to send most of the rebels back to the plantation. It was a stark recognition of 18th century realities.
Sometimes it's easy to look back at this and suggest that they were willing to sell out their followers. While the terms, I think it's true, are troubling in some ways, they were also trying to seek some change. And I think the key here is that it was really difficult to imagine that you would actually eliminate slavery.
New French commissioners had just arrived from Paris to restore order. More liberal than the planters, they urged Saint-Domingue's whites to accept the rebels' offer, and they called slave leaders to the capital of Le Cap for negotiations. Trust was minimal. Some slave rebels wanted to kill their white prisoners, but Toussaint Louverture argued against it. He wanted the whites returned to Le Cap as a gesture of goodwill.
So Toussaint is sent to negotiate with the planters with the idea that, in a sense, a settlement can be reached. The settlement is not only for the